My sister's housewarming party took precedence over my wedding in my parents' eyes, simply because I refused to invite her after she physically attacked me. As a result, my grandparents will be walking me down the aisle instead of my parents. For as long as I can remember, I've always felt that my parents favored my older sister, Mia, over me. She was the child they planned for, while I was an unexpected addition, born just 7 months later. It often seemed like I was a child they had reluctantly decided to keep rather than one they truly wanted. My maternal grandparents had passed away before I was born, but my paternal grandparents were very much alive and played a significant role in my upbringing. Grandma and Grandpa were my anchors, providing the love and support that I felt was often missing from my parents. I recall many times when my parents would leave me behind with my grandparents while taking Mia on trips. As a young child, I didn't mind because spending time with my grandparents was enjoyable. However, as I grew older, around the age of 8 or 9, I began to realize how unfair this was. My issues were not limited to my parents, they extended to Mia as well. Even though I didn't hold any grudges against her, I couldn't shake the feeling of being an unwelcome addition to the family. Mia seemed to recognize this and often made me feel like a stranger in my own home. She constantly competed with me, whether it was for grades, attention from our parents, or even the smallest accomplishments. It felt like a never-ending struggle for validation, with Mia always coming out on top due to my parents' favoritism. For instance, there was a time when Mia wanted to befriend a group of girls at school, but felt too awkward to approach them. I had art classes with these girls and had already made friends with them. I introduced Mia to the group, hoping to help her out. However, her enthusiasm to fit in came off as overbearing. She would try too hard to impress the girls, often coming across as intrusive. The tension between Mia and the girls was obvious, particularly when she made a clumsy attempt to interfere in a romantic situation that ended up embarrassing one of the girls. The girls made it clear that they did not want Mia to join us during our hangouts. I agreed, but Mia was outraged. She threw a tantrum, went to our parents, and insisted that I should not hang out with these mean girls anymore, claiming I should stand up for her. I refused, pointing out that it was her behavior that led to her being excluded. As always, my parents sided with Mia, lecturing me about her good intentions and pressuring me to mend things with the girls. They even suggested that if the girls did not forgive Mia, I should cut them off. Sticking to my decision was challenging. I liked my friends and was unwilling to jeopardize those relationships for Mia. I told my parents that finding friends for her was not my responsibility, and I wasn't going to sacrifice my happiness for her sake. My parents were furious and gave me the silent treatment for weeks, but I'm glad I held firm. The group of girls remained my close friends, becoming like sisters to me. We've shared many meaningful moments, and despite the difficulties, I'm proud of the choice I made to prioritize my own happiness. However, there was another reason for the growing animosity between Mia and me involving a boy she had a crush on, which added to the complexity of our strained relationship. There was a guy in my class whom I'd sit with sometimes because we were friends. He eventually asked me to the junior prom, but I had to turn him down politely because I was already going with someone I liked. When Mia found out about this, she made a huge fuss. She told my parents that I always take things she wants and accused me of intentionally flirting with this guy for months. She called me a bunch of hurtful names that no sister should say to another, and even told my parents she wished I wasn't her sister. My mom sided with Mia and scolded me, saying that I should have respected the girl code. I tried to explain that I wasn't interested in the guy and had declined his invitation, so Mia was free to ask him herself if she wanted. But Mia wouldn't let it go. Looking back, I think she was just upset because she knew the guy would likely have turned her down anyway, so she took her frustration out on me since he had asked me instead. One day, my dad took me out for ice cream, which was a rare treat and something I was really looking forward to. However, during our outing, he started asking me some strange questions. He asked if my boyfriend and I were being careful, if my boyfriend came from a good family, and if we were using drugs. I was shocked by these questions and asked him why he was asking me this. That's when my dad revealed that Mia had been telling them that I was doing drugs and drinking alcohol with my boyfriend. This was a complete lie. I showed my dad my phone to prove that Mia was making things up. Later, when my dad confronted Mia about the lies, she tried to justify her behavior by saying that no one our age simply hangs out with a guy and that I must be hiding something. I was furious and yelled at her, telling her it wasn't my fault she didn't have anyone to date and that she needed to stay out of my business. Mia didn't handle this well. Out of nowhere, she punched me. It was the first time she had ever been physically violent. My nose started bleeding and I fell to the ground in pain. My parents rushed me to the emergency room, pleading with me not to file a police report against Mia. They said it would ruin her life, while I sat in the back seat, clutching my face. Mia showed no concern and didn't apologize. When the nurse asked me about what happened, I told her the truth. She ended up calling Child Protective Investigator. My parents were furious with me for involving Child Protective Investigator, viewing it as a betrayal. They insisted that Mia's actions were just an isolated incident and shouldn't warrant such drastic measures. They begged the authorities to overlook it, claiming Mia wasn't a danger to me and that her actions were out of character. In the end, Mia was not taken away, but Child Protective Investigator warned my parents that they would keep an eye on our situation. Mia and my parents were clearly shaken. My parents told me they were disappointed in me for trying to ruin my sister's life. My mom cried and accused me of tearing the family apart by involving outsiders. My dad's disappointment was evident as he questioned why I escalated the situation. I stood firm, telling them that I wanted Mia out of my life. They eventually agreed, though I felt guilty for involving the authorities. For the first time, I felt safer in my own home once Mia had been formally warned. After this incident, Mia stopped talking to me completely, and I was relieved. I preferred this distance over her constant presence and attempts to interfere in my life. When my grandparents learned about everything, they invited me to move in with them for the rest of high school. My parents didn't protest much, so I moved in with my grandparents. Here, I finally felt safe and loved. The remainder of high school went well, and I made many lasting memories with my friends. Throughout this time, my parents never visited or called me. I knew they were content with their favorite daughter, so I didn't reach out to them, despite the pain it caused me. The way my parents could so easily disregard me was devastating. When I graduated high school, they only showed up to cheer for Mia. They didn't congratulate me or even approach me, making me feel like a complete stranger to them. My grandparents, however, were there for me. They were so disappointed with my parents' blatant favoritism that they scolded them. I'm not sure what my grandfather said, but after that, my dad awkwardly came up to me and congratulated me on my graduation. Soon after, I received wonderful news. I had been accepted into a great college with a full scholarship. I was thrilled, especially because I had been dreading asking my parents for financial help. I shared the news with my grandparents, and they took me out to a nice restaurant to celebrate. My grandmother even posted pictures of me on Facebook, writing a heartfelt caption about how proud she was of me and my achievements. Our relatives saw the post and began congratulating me, which might have prompted some of them to reach out to my parents. Instead of being pleased, my mother called me the next day with upsetting news. She told me that Mia was locked in her room, crying because she hadn't been accepted into any colleges yet. My mother accused me of trying to make Mia feel bad by sharing my good news with our relatives. She claimed it was my fault Mia was struggling academically and emotionally after the Child Protective Investigator incident. I was heartbroken that my mother could blame me for Mia's problems. This was the last straw, and I decided not to speak with her for a long time. My grandparents helped me move into my college dorm. My high school boyfriend and I had broken up because his college was far away, so I started college single. I was excited to begin this new chapter of my life with newfound independence. Although the breakup was tough, I was eager to meet new people. It was during this time that I met Mark. We were both freshmen and spent a lot of time in the library. Mark was unlike anyone I had met before. His quiet demeanor and dedication to studying matched my own, and we quickly bonded over our shared love for academics. As the months passed, our friendship grew into something deeper. I realized I had developed feelings for Mark that went beyond friendship. Being outgoing, I decided to express my feelings to him, and I was delighted to discover that he felt the same way. We started dating, and our relationship has now lasted for 8 wonderful years. My grandparents have met Mark and absolutely adore him. I've also met Mark's parents, who treat me like their own daughter. Mark's mother has even told me that she's always wanted a daughter, so she's thrilled that Mark found someone like me. For the first time, I feel surrounded by family members who genuinely like and support me. I've shared stories of my childhood with Mark, and he listens with empathy and understanding. Over these 8 years, my parents have rarely contacted me, except for an occasional birthday text, if they remembered. Recently, Mark and I got engaged. He proposed to me during one of our favorite sunrise treks, and it was an incredibly sweet moment. I was overjoyed and accepted his proposal without any doubts. I posted our engagement pictures on Instagram and informed my grandparents, who were thrilled for us and offered their congratulations. The news must have reached my parents because they called me out of the blue to congratulate me. I was surprised, as we hadn't spoken much over the years. During the call, they asked about my life, my jobs, and my apartment. Then my dad asked if he could walk me down the aisle. I was taken aback by the sudden request, especially since he had only recently learned about my jobs. I told him I hadn't decided yet. My dad then mentioned how it would be awkward if I didn't ask him, and others might question it. My parents' request for me to have my dad walk me down the aisle was surprising. They said it would be better if he did, but I was frustrated by their sudden interest, especially since they hadn't been involved in my life for years. I told them I wasn't even sure if I wanted to invite them to the wedding, given our lack of contact. This angered my parents. My mother expressed her disappointment, emphasizing the importance of family and tradition. She reminded me that they would always be my parents, and I should let go of past grievances. Part of me wanted to accept their offer and mend our relationship, but another part was wary of opening myself up to more hurt. As I was about to start a new chapter in my life, I decided to let my dad walk me down the aisle. He seemed genuinely happy, which was a relief. During wedding planning, I reached out to my high school friends, who I had stayed in touch with despite the physical distance caused by our careers. I asked them to be my bridesmaids, and there were lots of happy tears and congratulations. They eagerly accepted, thrilled to reunite and celebrate this milestone together. We planned a fun bachelorette party in Vegas, while Mark had his own separate celebration with his friends. We took tons of pictures and had a blast. However, when I returned home, my parents called to express their disappointment that I hadn't invited Mia to be part of the celebration. I told them flatly that there was no way I would involve Mia in my bachelorette party or my wedding. Her actions and past betrayals had deeply hurt me, and I couldn't imagine her presence adding anything positive to such an intimate event. I also explained that this was why she wasn't invited to the wedding either. My parents were outraged. They insisted that I had no right to exclude my sister from such an important occasion, and that it was my duty as her sister to include her. They mentioned that Mia had been looking forward to seeing me now that I was getting married, but I was confused since we hadn't spoken in ages. My parents dismissed my concerns, saying that sisters should always support each other. I tried to explain that my relationship with Mia was complicated and that I didn't feel comfortable having her at my wedding, especially since she had never apologized for her actions. But as usual, my parents ignored my feelings. My mother continued to insist that inviting Mia wasn't a big deal and was for the good of the family. My dad worried that our relatives would gossip about her absence and cast a negative light on the wedding. I stood firm in my decision, telling them I was okay with people talking behind my back as long as I was surrounded by people I trusted and liked on my wedding day. My mother then questioned whether Mark and my in-laws would be okay with this and warned that they might judge me for excluding my sister. I laughed and reassured my parents that Mark and his family were well aware of my family dynamics and wouldn't care about Mia's presence or absence. Despite their pleas for reconsideration, emphasizing family unity and forgiveness, I remained resolute. I wasn't willing to compromise my own peace of mind for the sake of pleasing others. We ended the conversation with a mutual agreement to disagree. My parents said they needed time to think things over. Feeling a bit guilty for standing up to them, I informed my grandparents about the situation. They completely supported my decision and reassured me. My grandparents told me they understood my position and were proud of how I handled the situation. I had been feeling a bit better about my decision to not invite Mia and not let my parents guilt trip me. With the wedding coming up fast, I was focused on planning and preparing for the big day. Then, last week, my dad called with some surprising news. He said he and my mom had decided they would not be attending my wedding. Before I could react, he added that this also meant he wouldn't be walking me down the aisle. When I asked him why, he explained that Mia was moving to a new place, and since I had chosen not to invite her to the wedding, my parents had decided to attend her housewarming party instead. I was stunned and hurt. The fact that Mia's housewarming took precedence over my wedding was incredibly painful and felt like a betrayal. I managed to keep my composure and told my dad I understood before ending the call. Although I tried to stay strong in front of my dad, I felt deeply rejected. When I told Mark about the call, he was furious. He couldn't believe how insensitive my parents were being, especially after insisting on being invited. Mark suggested I ask my grandparents to walk me down the aisle instead. He reminded me how much they had been there for me, more than my own parents had. I took Mark's advice and reached out to my grandparents. As I asked them if they would be willing to walk me down the aisle, I could barely hold back tears. I told them how much they meant to me, saying, "You and Grandpa have always been there for me. You've been more like parents than just grandparents. I can't imagine anyone else I'd rather have by my side on my wedding day." Without hesitation, my grandparents agreed. They were honored and excited to take part in my special day. Their reassurance filled me with a sense of peace and comfort. I knew I had a family who loved me unconditionally and accepted me for who I was. I also spoke to Mark's parents, who assured me that they didn't mind if my parents didn't come and were thrilled to support us regardless. My wedding is in 3 days. This morning, I woke up to several missed calls from my dad. When I called him back, he asked if it was true that my grandparents would be walking me down the aisle. I confirmed that it was. He then launched into a tirade about how disrespectful it was for me to have asked my grandparents. He insisted that by declining to come to the wedding, he and Mom were trying to teach me a lesson. He said they had raised me and paid for my education, so my grandparents had no right to take his place. I tried to explain that my grandparents had been there for me in ways he and Mom never had, but he wouldn't listen. He accused me of alienating everyone and said it was all my fault. After our conversation, I've been questioning whether I did something wrong by asking my grandparents to walk me down the aisle. I've come to the difficult decision that I need to cut off my parents permanently. Their constant back and forth behavior has become exhausting and is affecting my mental health. I can't continue being in their lives when it's clear that Mia will always be their top priority. I've known for a long time that my parents are selfish, but it's hard to stop loving them, especially when it comes to family. It's easy to say you'll cut someone off, but actually doing it is incredibly challenging. For my own peace of mind, though, I have no choice but to take this step so I can fully enjoy my wedding tomorrow. With my grandparents by my side as I walked down the aisle, I felt immense joy as I exchanged vows with Mark and committed to spending the rest of my life with him. My girlfriends and I had an amazing time dancing and celebrating. It was a reminder of how crucial it is to stay connected with childhood friends. Sometimes they become your chosen family. During the reception, I did feel a pang of sadness, knowing that my parents weren't there to share in this special moment. Watching Mark's parents and cousins give heartfelt speeches made me realize what I was missing out on. However, I took comfort in knowing that I made the right decision for myself. Prioritizing my well-being and happiness was the best choice, despite the absence of my parents. My girlfriends gave beautiful speeches, reminiscing about our shared experiences and the bond that has supported us through both good and bad times. After the wedding, Mark and I went on our honeymoon, which was a generous gift from his parents. We spent our days relaxing and enjoying each other's company. I still feel a thrill whenever I look at Mark and realize that we're married. As I mentioned before, I did end up cutting off my parents by blocking them on all platforms. I didn't feel the need to send them an explanation. Frankly, they don't deserve one. I'm not sure if Mia actually had a housewarming party or if it was just an excuse for my parents to avoid my wedding. But at this point, I don't care. I wish them and their favorite daughter the best. I hadn't checked my email for a month due to my wedding and honeymoon, but today, while sorting through my inbox, I came across an email from Mia. I was shocked and confused about how she found my email address. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me, so I opened it. The email was a long message from Mia expressing regret over our strained relationship and a desire to reconcile. She admitted to past mistakes, acknowledging her selfishness and immaturity. Mia apologized for the pain she caused me and expressed a genuine wish to make amends. She wrote that she's happy for me now that I'm married and wished me the best. She ended the email by asking me not to punish my parents and said they missed me. Reading her words, I felt a swirl of emotions: surprise, skepticism, and a bit of hope. Part of me wants to believe that Maya has genuinely changed and is sincere in her apology. However, another part of me remains cautious because this all seems too good to be true. Regardless of our apology, I know my parents don't miss me. If they did, they wouldn't have treated me the way they did over the years. I considered replying to Mia, but decided against it for now. Forgiveness is a process that takes time and reflection. I'm not sure if I'm ready to forgive Mia, but I don't want to completely sever ties either, especially since she's the one who reached out with an apology. After my wedding, I no longer feel alone. I have Mark, my supportive friends, and the unwavering love of my grandparents. With their support, I feel confident I can face any future challenges without needing Mia or my parents in my life. I've also found a good therapist and scheduled my first appointment. This step will help me address and heal from any past wounds.